I was the first governor to ban TikTok on state devices because of the threat it poses. Why did I do that? Well, because Xi Jinping said that he wants to replace us as the world leader. Dictators tend to say what they're going to do and try and do it. We should take him seriously. TikTok is one of the ways that he is trying to do it, trying to undermine what we do around the world. The Chinese Communist Party wants to replace us. TikTok is one of the ways they are trying to influence our downfall. As many as 150 million Americans use TikTok. 52% of them say they regularly get news through TikTok. And
news don't come from the Chinese,
we know
dumb.
that the CCP uses TikTok to slant the news. This is part of their propaganda. Data shows, for example, my esteemed colleague from Arkansas referenced it, the anti-Semitism on TikTok. If you go back and look, you can see 50 times the posts on pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian content, 50 times the views, despite the fact that overwhelmingly Americans support Israel. The polling shows it. And that's just one of the issues that they get involved with. We wouldn't allow any foreign adversary to own enough TV stations, radio stations, or newspapers to reach 150 million Americans. Why are we allowing our chief adversary in the world, one that seeks our downfall, to have that kind of access? It makes absolutely no sense. And of course, the Chinese Communist Party has no free rights in America. Those belong to American citizens. We need to make sure we take a step against this. And last April we did. Overwhelmingly, bipartisan, bicameral, because this Congress saw the threat that TikTok poses by the Chinese Communist Party being able to influence ByteDance, because they have to. ByteDance is a Chinese company, has to do whatever the Chinese Communist Party says. That's their law. They have to do what the Chinese Communist Party says. So therefore, they push the propaganda, and as my colleague from Arkansas pointed out, they spy on Americans, collect data on Americans. And so we saw a bipartisan effort, over 350 votes in the House to pass this bill. And by the way, the same bipartisan support here in the Senate, passing 79 to 18. The law gathered so much bipartisan, bicameral support because we recognized this was about keeping America and Americans safe. That ByteDance needed to divest TikTok so that we could be assured that the Chinese Communist Party wasn't pushing its propaganda or spying on us. We acted with conviction against that threat, and of course, we know from our classified briefings what that threat for TikTok was. And this threat is not something far off or imagined. We have seen TikTok's interference in elections elsewhere around the world, most recently in Romania. The European Commission just opened an investigation into TikTok's failure to limit election interference in Romania's election, and that has caused all sorts of disruption in that country. India has banned TikTok for the very same reason, that they are seeing the push of Chinese propaganda that slants on their news media the same way we see it here in America. Albania, worried about Romania, banned TikTok. We passed a law that did not ban TikTok. We passed a law that said you have to have an American owner, like, I don't know, radio stations, TV stations, newspapers. The senator from Massachusetts would like to give us a 270-day extension. What's going to be different? What is going to be different? ByteDance has had 270 days. And rather than making legitimate attempts to find a buyer, and by the way, you all recall the news stories, when this law was being discussed and being passed, there were a number of Americans who said they'd be interested in buying them. ByteDance didn't do anything. Rather than looking for an American buyer, they decided to hire an army of lobbyists and lawyers to try and subvert the will of the Congress. They spent the last 270 days trying to avoid being sold. And as my colleague said, the Chinese Communist Party will not let them be sold. That in and of itself should tell you everything you need to know about this. If the Chinese Communist Party is refusing ByteDance to sell TikTok to an American buyer, you know they are using it to push their propaganda and to collect data on us. They don't want those algorithms coming to America because then they'll be exposed. That's what this is about. This is a national security threat. That's why we took action last April. They've had these 270 days. They did nothing with them. To extend it would mean nothing as well, except give the Chinese Communist Party another 270 days to push their propaganda and to spy on more Americans. Finally, today in our Foreign Relations Committee hearing, we had the confirmation hearing for Senator Rubio, who's being nominated for Secretary of State. I asked him in his confirmation hearing earlier today, why average Americans in Nebraska should care about the threat the Chinese Communist Party poses to our way of life. And he had a great response, and I want to read it here. He said, if we stay on the road we're on right now, in less than 10 years, virtually everything that matters to us in life will depend on whether China will allow us to have it or not. Folks, this is a clear test of whether America is willing to get off that road. Are we willing to change direction? Are we willing to say to the Chinese Communist Party, enough, no further, not now? We are changing, we are getting away from the bad practices of the past that the Chinese Communist Party has taken advantage of. Let's send a clear signal to Beijing that Americans' national security is going to take a priority. Let's stand strong. Let's remember we passed this law for a reason, and it's to keep Americans safe. And therefore, I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President.
Senator from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I am disappointed that my colleagues have objected to this simple legislation. I recognize the national security risk here, but the fear-mongering about the supposed anti-American content on TikTok is the exact type of government overreach that has left tens of millions of Americans furious. The hyperbolic statements made by my colleagues are especially concerning, given that the intelligence community itself has acknowledged that it has no information that China is covertly manipulating content on TikTok. No information. Let me say that again. In the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, the government was asked to present evidence that ByteDance was covertly manipulating content on TikTok for the benefit of the Chinese government. And the intelligence community submitted an affidavit saying that the government has no information that it is being manipulated. So as we're out here today, by the way, that would change the whole debate. If they had information, we'd be having a different debate. If there was proof that they were manipulated, provided by the intelligence community, we'd be having a different debate. They don't have any information. And I sat in the same intelligence briefings that my colleagues did, and I kept waiting to hear that information. I never heard it. I don't think it's giving up secrets to say I didn't hear any secrets. I didn't hear them because there weren't any. And they made that filing in the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. They have no information. And I've read the reports and news articles. I've tracked the court case closely. I'm clear-eyed. about the rest, but unlike many of my colleagues, I am also clear-eyed about the profound economic, political, and social importance of TikTok to 170 million users and 7 million businesses in the United States. And I understand how many creators depend on TikTok to find community, share their story, find resources. So my ask again here is simple: 270 days. And we can try to find a resolution of this issue that doesn't have a draconian cutoff on Sunday afternoon. So this is the issue that we're confronted with at this point. We don't have the evidence that is being cited by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. It doesn't exist. They may believe it, but they don't have the evidence to present to this body because the intelligence community has not provided it to them. Otherwise, again, as I'm saying, we would have a very different debate. And this is a very important issue because the Supreme Court just had a hearing. It's unbelievable that it's 9 months later on the constitutionality of your ban. So I think that the colleagues of mine who spoke on the other side, they're saying, well, they should have already sold it. Well, they took it to court to find out if this law is constitutional. They have a right to do that. They have a right to go to the Supreme Court. They have a right to have a hearing. They have a right to make their case. They have a right to say that it's unconstitutional. It hasn't been ruled on yet. It hasn't been ruled on. And so because of that, all I'm asking for is more time. Listen to Donald Trump. He's saying, give it more time. That's all I'm asking for. And I will say as well, when my friend cites suicides, other incredible consequences of social media in our society, I do agree with him 100%. But it's not just TikTok. It's Instagram. It's Facebook. It's company after company after company that's targeting 14-year-old girls with bulimia, with anorexia, with information that's making them even sicker and sicker and sicker. That's why when my bill was killed here in December to pass a law which said that parents can just say, erase all that information you're gathering about my daughter, and it's the third Congress in a row that it happened, yeah, TikTok should be stopped. And so shouldn't Facebook, and so shouldn't Instagram, so shouldn't all of them. But just don't raise it in a TikTok context. Raise it as well in a Senate context. That law should have passed. That should have been already on the president's desk. And it was bipartisan. It was bipartisan. You want to talk about lobbyists. You want to talk about stopping legislation, okay? So I agree with the gentleman on the fundamental fact that TikTok is a contributor to this problem. But it's part of a larger problem. And I also want to make the point that there's no imminent threat of a compromise of this information that we're talking about here today, because the intelligence community does not, in fact, have the information to say that that is accurate. So I agree with Donald Trump. Give it more time. Allow for the process to play out. Allow for the Supreme Court to make a decision. Allow for potential buyers to step forth. Allow for the users of TikTok, the 7 million businesses to use it, that use it for their own families. Allow for the families in the fire zone in LA to continue to use it to build community, to run their small businesses, and not cut it off on Sunday. And that is what I have been asking the Senate to do. So I regret that the objection has been raised by my colleagues, but I tell you, there's going to be real harm. And my hope is that I can partner with President-elect Trump to try to find a resolution of this issue so that we do it with the information that right now we do not have to take such an action. So with that, Mr. President, I yield back.
President.
Senator from Arkansas.